She was 4 years old, tucked into bed, dreaming of birthday cake. But at 2:11 a.m. on May 8, 2024, gunmen sprayed her family's home with AK-47 rounds. Neighbors later counted nearly 30 bullet holes. Marianne Marble died. Her parents and siblings were critically wounded. Authorities called it an ambush. But inside investigators' logs, weeks before that night, a rifle was traced, messages exchanged, and plans sketched in encrypted chats. Who planned this attack? And why did it land on a house with a toddler inside? And what investigators later found about the suspect's digital path stunned even veteran detectives. It was just past 2 a.m. on a humid August night in Dallas, Texas. The quiet of Windsor Hollow Drive was broken only by the hum of cicadas and the occasional passing car. Inside a modest brick home, 4-year-old Marianne Marble was asleep beneath a blanket covered in cartoon clouds, the kind every little girl dreams under. At 2:11 a.m., a black SUV crept down the street with its headlights dimmed. Neighbors would later say it looked like it was hunting. Seconds later, that silence shattered. 23 rounds tore through the house, windows exploding, drywall collapsing, furniture splintering into dust. One of those bullets struck Marianne as she slept. Others ripped into her parents' bedroom, her siblings' walls, the hallway where toys still lay scattered from the night before. The first 911 calls came within seconds. Shots fired! Child down! We need units now! By the time officers arrived, the street looked like a war zone. Shell casings glittered under streetlights. Smoke lingered in the air. Neighbors huddled together on their lawns, some crying, some screaming, all in disbelief. It was like a war zone. And then I heard the screaming. Paramedics rushed Marianne out on a stretcher, her small frame barely visible beneath the medical blankets. Her mother collapsed to the ground, begging her daughter to wake up. Her father shouted into the night, demanding to know who could do this, who could fire into a home knowing a child was inside. The neighborhood that once felt safe was now a crime scene. Front doors that were once left unlocked stayed bolted. Porch lights that once went dark at bedtime now burned all night. Police canvassed the area, going door to door. They found shattered glass, bullet holes in walls, and blood on the nursery floor. But one detail stopped them cold. Among the 24 shell casings scattered across the front lawn, one didn't match. It was a different caliber, a different weapon. And that raised a terrifying question. Had there been more than one shooter? Within minutes of the chaos at Windsor Hollow Drive, the Bexar County Sheriff's Office swarmed the home. Crime scene units erected tents. Detectives bagged shell casings. Medics tended to the wounded while forensic teams began photographing every bullet hole, shattered pane, and soaked mattress. Investigators retrieved fragments of a Draco-style AK-47 rifle and bullet casings that matched high-powered rounds fired in the assault. Dive teams were later deployed to Calaveras Lake, where one of the rifles was recovered, confirmed via ballistics to match the Windsor Hollow scene. Meanwhile, surveillance footage from nearby homes and traffic cameras was pulled. Investigators traced a gray Infiniti Q50 speeding away from the site. The same vehicle had been flagged by witnesses driving slowly through the neighborhood just days before the shooting. Cell phone tower records became essential. Data showed at least 2 phones turned off as the shooters approached the house. Then, minutes after the attack, they were turned back on near the lake. The temporal alignment was too precise to ignore. Investigators began interviewing dozens of residents. One neighbor said she saw masked figures step from the vehicle with rifles, then open fire in rapid succession. Another claimed she heard the sound of rain, not from weather, but the hail of bullets hitting siding and glass. But investigators soon discovered a clue that changed everything. When they analyzed the recovered rifles, one was linked to an earlier drive-by shooting in San Antonio. That unexpected overlap suggested a network, not just a single act. They also linked one of the suspects, Isaiah Perales, arrested in October 2024, to the crime. Perales had been charged with capital murder and aggravated assault, but the case file was still growing. But another name emerged, Brian Salazar, 20 years old, now arrested in late September 2025. Deputies say Brian is now facing capital murder, aggravated assault, and injury to child counts tied to that same drive-by on Windsor Hollow Drive in May 2024. Prosecutors say Perales and Salazar stole the Infiniti Q50 used in the attack just days earlier. They then used it as a getaway vehicle after firing nearly 30 rounds into the home. The house was described by officials as looking like Swiss cheese from bullet holes. Surveillance video and tips to Crime Stoppers helped link both suspects to the shooting. Meanwhile, the investigation file ballooned, nearly 400 pages of detailed evidence, leading detectives to believe the attack was planned carefully, not impulsive. Yet amid the mountain of forensic data, questions remained. Phone records, weapon dumps, ballistics, all pointing to coordinated action. But digital clues hinted at something else, deeper, hidden. And as they delved into the phones and social media, one encrypted message raised an alarm. This will settle the score. By October 23, 2024, investigators believed they had their first lead. That day, 20-year-old Isaiah Perales was arrested in Bexar County and charged with capital murder in connection with the May 8 drive-by that killed Marianne Marble and wounded her family. Deputies alleged that Perales had searched the Marble family's address ahead of the shooting, and that his cell phone was in the area at the time the rounds were fired. His arrest brought public relief, but also more questions. Was he the mastermind, or just a piece of a larger plan? Authorities said the weapon retrieved from Calaveras Lake earlier that year, a Draco AK-style rifle, matched shell casings from the scene. The recovery of that firearm had become a cornerstone of the case. In September 2025, another major break came. Brian Salazar, 20, was arrested on charges of capital murder, aggravated assault, and injury to a child. Investigators believe he and Perales acted in tandem. As Sheriff Javier Salazar noted, the attack may have been retaliation. Brian's relative Xavier Perez had been killed 2 weeks prior. Witness and cell tower data placed both men near Windsor Hollow the night of the shooting. Their phones went dark at the moment of the attack, and were later pinged near the lake where the weapon was submerged. The suspects allegedly stole the Infiniti Q50 used as the getaway car days earlier and kept it until the ambush. But beyond the physical evidence, the digital traces painted a darker picture. Analysis of surveillance video, stolen license plates, and stolen car records revealed planning. Authorities say the suspects conducted surveillance in the days preceding the shooting. One neighbor's account stands out. A car seen parked near the Marble home for days, its occupants quietly observing. Another witness reportedly saw the shooters exit the vehicle in masks, fire and volley, then flee. As the pressure grew, prosecutors built their case around motive. Investigators pointed to Xavier Perez's murder as the catalyst for revenge. It was not a random shooting. According to authorities, it was planned. Yet even with both Perales and Salazar in custody, the community still wonders, if these two men were enough to carry out the attack, why was so much care taken to hide evidence? Was there direction from someone else? And the more detectives analyzed their phones and messages, clues began surfacing to suggest this was not just about vengeance. It may have been about message, power, and control. By the winter of 2025, the case of Marianne Marble had become a national flashpoint. What began as a late-night shooting in a quiet Dallas suburb was now a rallying cry for lawmakers, activists, and grieving parents across the United States. In the weeks following the arrests of Isaiah Perales and Brian Salazar, protests swept through Bexar and Dallas counties. At candlelight vigils, Marianne's name was spoken alongside those of other young victims of gun violence. Mothers held signs reading, "Not one more child." Fathers called for harsher penalties for gang-related crimes. At a press conference, Sheriff Javier Salazar described the case as one of the most disturbing he'd ever seen. A 4-year-old girl was executed in her sleep. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't stray gunfire. This was a deliberate act of violence carried out over a vendetta that had nothing to do with her. Court filings painted the same picture. Prosecutors argued that Perales and Salazar had been on a mission of retaliation for the death of Xavier Perez, and that they had targeted the wrong house. The intended victim lived 3 doors down. Inside the courtroom, Marianne's parents sat just feet from the men accused of killing their daughter. When prosecutors described how 23 rounds tore through the family's walls, one striking Marianne in the head as she slept in her bed, her mother sobbed audibly. The trial wasn't just about guilt, it was about accountability and whether the justice system could truly deliver it. Community leaders demanded federal involvement. Advocacy groups called for sweeping reform to online firearm marketplaces and increased tracking of stolen vehicles used in violent crimes. And on Capitol Hill, several lawmakers cited the case during debates on background checks and youth gang prevention bills. But the most difficult questions weren't legal or political. They were deeply personal. How did two 20-year-olds get access to an AK-style rifle? Why were they able to coordinate a targeted attack using stolen vehicles and encrypted messages without being detected? And how did a feud between young men end with a toddler's death? But as the courtroom drama played out, investigators were quietly following a new trail, one that led far beyond Dallas. And what they found would turn everything the public believed about the case upside down. Just when the case against Isaiah Perales and Brian Salazar seemed straightforward, a brutal act of revenge gone wrong, investigators stumbled upon a discovery that reshaped everything they thought they knew. While combing through Perales' confiscated phone, digital forensic analysts uncovered a series of encrypted conversations on a messaging app known for its anonymity. The chats were chilling. In one message sent just days before the shooting, a user with the handle North88 wrote, "The message will be delivered, even if the target shifts." Another message included a map of the neighborhood where Marianne's family lived, but it wasn't sent by either Perales or Salazar. Federal investigators traced the accounts and discovered they were part of a private online group that law enforcement had been monitoring for over a year. A group with suspected ties to organized gang networks across Texas and parts of northern Mexico. The revelation changed the theory of the case entirely. It appeared Perales and Salazar weren't just acting on their own rage. They were being guided, perhaps even manipulated, by individuals they'd never met in person. Messages suggested they were offered money, protection, and status in exchange for carrying out the shooting. And the most disturbing part? At least 2 other violent incidents in Texas over the past 18 months were linked to accounts tied to the same group. The Marianne Marble case, investigators now believed, wasn't an isolated tragedy. It was part of a much larger pattern. Prosecutors quietly amended their filings, hinting at additional charges and possible federal indictments. And while Perales and Salazar remained behind bars, the search widened for others involved. People who might never have pulled a trigger, but who, according to authorities, may have ordered the killing from behind a screen. For Marianne's family, the revelation was both devastating and clarifying. Their daughter hadn't died in a random act of violence. She had become a pawn in a coordinated campaign of retaliation and terror, one that stretched far beyond their street, their city, even their country. And if investigators were right, the men in custody weren't the only ones responsible. Somewhere out there, the people who ordered the killing might still be free. On a quiet night in Dallas, a 4-year-old girl named Marianne Marble went to bed in her unicorn pajamas. She never woke up. What began as a suspected gang-related drive-by soon unraveled into a chilling story of revenge, online coordination, and systemic failure. In the aftermath, Marianne's neighborhood transformed into a place of remembrance. Candlelight vigils lined the streets. Teddy bears piled against the bullet-riddled walls, and strangers who had never met her brought flowers and prayers. But beneath the grief, there was anger. A question echoed through the community, from living rooms to city council chambers. How did this happen? Investigators had received clues, online chatter, suspicious messages, encrypted threats, weeks before the shooting. Yet, none of it stopped the bullets that claimed an innocent child's life. Critics say law enforcement missed clear signs of a coordinated plot. Others point to deeper problems, the growing nexus between social media, organized crime, and gang recruitment of young men like Isaiah Perales and Brian Salazar. Marianne's story became a rallying cry. Politicians debated tougher laws on encrypted messaging apps. Parents demanded better neighborhood surveillance and more proactive policing. And across the country, families wondered if their own homes could be next. But perhaps the most profound impact was personal. In a tearful statement at a memorial service, Marianne's mother whispered, "She loved rainbows. She loved dancing in the kitchen. And now she's gone because of someone else's hate." Her words broke hearts and reminded the world that behind every headline, every police briefing, every courtroom hearing, there's a story of a life cut short. Experts warn that this case is a symptom of a larger, more dangerous trend, where digital spaces fuel real-world violence and innocent lives become collateral damage. And unless those systems change, Marianne's story may not be the last of its kind. In the end, Marianne Marble's name will be etched into the memory of a nation, not just as a victim, but as a haunting reminder of how far hate can reach and how fragile the line is between safety and tragedy. And while justice may have been served for the men who pulled the trigger, the larger question remains unanswered. Was this truly the act of two angry young men, or part of a deeper, darker structure that remains untouched? Until those answers are found, Marianne's story isn't over. Now that you've heard the full story of Marianne Marble, I want to leave you with a question that still haunts investigators, journalists, and millions of people who followed this case. Do you believe that Isaiah Perales and Brian Salazar acted entirely on their own that night? Or was there someone else behind the screen, guiding every move, pulling every string? Your theory might hold a piece of the puzzle that's still missing. I read every single comment, and some of the most powerful conversations happen right here, below this video. And if you want more stories like this, real investigations, real names, and real cases the news won't fully tell you, then make sure you subscribe to Crime Scene 24/7 and turn on notifications. Because here, the truth never sleeps. And neither do the stories that shape it. This is not the end of Marianne's story. It's only the beginning of a larger conversation about justice, accountability, and the hidden forces shaping our world. So, what do you think really happened?